The Tinklers 3. Marcus Tinkler lived with his two sisters, Mila and Turtle, on the 33rd floor of 33 Rushby Road. The Tinklers' parents worked for a travelling circus and were often away. Sometimes people felt sorry for the Tinkler kids because they lived alone, but they didn't need to. The Tinklers really liked living alone because it meant that they got to do exactly what they liked. The things that Marcus liked doing most were inventing and reading comics. His older sister Mila liked writing books and collecting birds' nests. She also liked wearing birds' nests on her head, as it helped her to think better. At least that's what she said. The thing that Marcus's younger sister Turtle liked doing best was pretending to be a turtle. Except that she didn't think it was pretending. She thought she really was a turtle. One day when Marcus woke up, he was surprised to see Mila already up and looking out of the bedroom window. Usually Mila loved to sleep in. Usually nothing could wake her up. She sighed loudly. Is something wrong? Said Marcus. Yes, said Mila in a gloomy voice. Something is terribly wrong. Come and look outside. Marcus hopped carefully out of his bed. Marcus always had to be careful when he hopped out of bed, because it was nailed halfway up the wall. Mila's bed was too. Turtle didn't sleep in a bed, she slept in a box. Marcus went to the window and looked out. What are you talking about, Mila? He said. It's a beautiful day outside. The sky is blue and the sun is shining. It's a great day for going outside. Exactly, said Mila, but I want to stay inside today. I feel like reading books and watching TV and snuggling up on the sofa with a blanket. That does sound good, said Marcus. I think I'd like to stay inside today too. Me too, said a little voice, except I want to stay under here all day. The little voice was coming from underneath a big red cardboard box in the middle of the room. Marcus knew that the voice belonged to Turtle. The box was her shell. So what's the problem, said Marcus. Let's stay inside. But Mila shook her head. We can't, she said. Remember our rule? The Tinklers have to go outside when it's sunny. Now maybe you think that because the Tinklers lived alone, they didn't have any rules. But you would be wrong. The Tinklers had rules. In fact, they had lots of them. But the Tinklers' rules were a little different from the rules other children had to follow. There was one that said they had to eat at least one bowl of ice cream every day. And another said that they had to sleep in at least 4 times a week. And there was one where they had to jump on the furniture for at least 1 whole hour every day. Marcus was pretty sure Mila made most of the rules up herself. Marcus had never heard the rule about going outside when it was sunny. It sounded strange. It sounded like the sort of rule that other children had to follow. Are you sure we can't stay inside? Marcus asked Mila. Mila nodded her head. Yes, I'm sure, she said firmly. It's one of those rules that every kid must stick to, even us. But let me think about it. Maybe there's a way around it. Mila picked up a bird's nest from the floor and put it on her head. Then she closed her eyes and began to think. Finally, Mila sneezed. She always did this when she had an idea. Sometimes her ideas were good, and sometimes they were terrible. Mila opened her eyes. She looked pleased. I just remembered something. It is okay for us to stay inside on a sunny day, she said. Great, said Marcus. He started looking around for a comic to read. Yay, cheered Turtle. Just a minute, said Mila. I haven't finished yet. It's okay for us to stay inside on a sunny day, but only if we're sick. Mila smiled like she had solved the problem. Marcus wasn't sure she had. But we're not sick, he said. Not at the moment, agreed Mila. But I'm sure it's very easy to get sick. Marcus frowned. So that's your plan, he thought? We should get sick and then we can stay inside? Mila nodded. Exactly, she said. It's a great plan, isn't it? Turtle stuck her head out from under her shell. Do you really think we should try to get sick, she asked. Of course, said Mila. Being sick is great fun. You get to lie in bed all day. You can watch as much television as you want. But we do those things anyway, Marcus pointed out. It's different when you're sick, said Mila. When you're sick, people do things for you. They bring you soup on a tray, which you eat sitting up in bed. People send you get well cards. Everyone makes a big fuss of you. It's fantastic. The more Mila talked, the better being sick sounded. Turtle thought so too because she came out of her shell completely. But how do we get sick, she asked. The Tinklers three thought about this. It can't be that hard, said Mila. People get sick all the time. Doesn't going outside without warm clothes on make you sick? said Marcus. It might, said Mila, but only when it's cold and wet outside. Today is sunny and dry. The Tinklers thought some more. I once heard a lady tell a little boy that if he didn't eat his vegetables he would get sick, said Marcus after a while. Mila jumped up. Yes, let's try that. She hurried off to the kitchen and brought back a big plate. On the plate were 3 carrots, 3 tomatoes and a lettuce. What do we do now, said Marcus. We don't eat them, said Mila. The Tinklers three sat and stared at the plate of vegetables. The minutes ticked by. It was very boring. This is taking too long, grumbled Turtle. I want to get sick quickly. You're right, agreed Mila. But do you have any better ideas? How about we drop some food on the ground and then eat it, said Turtle. Mrs. Splatly always says the ground is dirty and covered in germs. Mrs. Splatly lived downstairs with her husband and 3 awful children. Mila clapped her hands. Good idea, Turtle, she said. Mila took the lettuce off the plate and dropped it on the floor. Then she picked it up again and took a bite. Marcus looked at Mila closely. She didn't look any different. How do you feel? He asked. I feel fine, she said. Maybe we need to drop it from higher up, suggested Turtle. Let's drop it out of the window. This sounded like a great idea. Marcus found a very long piece of string. He tied it around the lettuce. Then he dropped the lettuce out of the window and held on to the end of the string. Marcus jiggled the string around for a few minutes. That should do it, he said finally. Together the Tinklers pulled in the string. The lettuce was gone. Can you see a lettuce down there? Asked Mila. No, said Marcus, but I can see a green splat that used to be our lettuce. Said Mila. I think we'll have to come up with a new idea. They sat down and thought again. I just remembered something, cried Marcus. If you eat too much ice cream, you get sick. Really? Said Mila, surprised. I'm pretty sure, said Marcus. Mila shrugged. Well, I guess we can try it, but I don't believe that's true. Marcus went to the kitchen. He got a big tub of ice cream out of the freezer and 3 big spoons. He gave 1 spoon to Mila, 1 to Turtle, and kept 1 for himself. Then he opened the tub and put it down in front of his sisters. Turtle pulled a face. I don't want to eat ice cream. Mila looked at Turtle. Turtle, she said steady, do you want to get sick or not? Yes, I do, said Turtle. Well, then you have to eat your ice cream, said Mila. Marcus, Mila and Turtle began to eat. They ate and ate until they finished the entire tub. Does anyone feel sick yet? Asked Marcus. No, said Mila. No, said Turtle. Neither do I, said Marcus. Maybe we haven't eaten enough ice cream yet. Mila went to the freezer and got another tub of ice cream. The Tinklers soon ate all of this too. Now does anyone feel sick? Asked Mila. I feel sick of eating ice cream, said Turtle. Me too, said Marcus, but I don't feel sick. What about you, Mila? Mila shook her head. I think I could eat ice cream all day and never feel sick, she said. The best way to get sick is to catch germs, said Turtle suddenly. Mila laughed. Don't be silly, Turtle, she said. Germs are tiny. You can only see them with a microscope. How can we catch something that's too small to see? But Marcus realised that Turtle was right. Catching germs is the best way to get sick, he said. And it doesn't matter that we can't see the germs. They can see us. Okay then, said Mila. Let's go outside and catch some germs. The Tinklers got dressed. Then they hopped into the lift to go down to the ground floor. As they were going down, Marcus said, when we get to the street, we have to look out for sick people. They have the germs we want to catch. What do sick people look like? Asked Turtle. Mila replied, they often have very pale faces, but sometimes their faces are very red. They can look green sometimes too, added Marcus. They cough a lot and they moan, said Mila, and sometimes they are covered in spots. Okay, said Turtle, they should be very easy to see. On the ground floor of the building was a bakery. As the Tinklers walked past, Barry and Betty, the bakers, called out to them. "What are you three doing today?" asked Barry. "We're going to get sick," said Marcus. Mila looked very closely at the bakers. "Do either of you feel sick?" she asked hopefully. "Betty, your face is very red, and Barry, yours is really white." Betty and Barry laughed. "My face is red because I've been baking jam tarts," explained Betty. "And mine is white because I've been sifting flour," added Barry. "Oh," said Mila. She looked very disappointed. "Don't worry," Barry said kindly. "I'm sure you will get sick very soon." "Here," said Betty, giving a big bag to Mila. "Have some jam tarts. These will make you feel better until you feel sick." "And have some bread too," added Barry, handing Mila a huge loaf of white bread. The Tinklers set off down Rushby Road. "It should be easy to find someone sick," said Mila. "Sick people are always complaining that they don't feel well." But by the time the Tinklers reached the end of the first block, they hadn't seen anyone who looked unwell. By the end of the second block, they still hadn't met a sick person. "Where are all the sick people?" said Mila. "Maybe they're all at home in bed," suggested Marcus. "Of course," said Mila. "That's exactly where they must be. We'll have to ring people's doorbells and ask if there are any sick people inside. Come on." Marcus didn't really want to ring on people's doorbells. "There is another place people go when they're sick," he said quietly. "To the doctor. If we go to the doctor's office, we're sure to catch a few germs." Mila thought about this. Then she nodded. "Yes, you're right. We'll definitely find sick people at the doctor's." Marcus led the way. It was a long walk and Turtle soon got tired. "Who's going to carry me?" she asked. "Mila, it's your turn," said Marcus. But Mila shook her head. "Sorry, but I'm already carrying the bread and the jam tarts. You'll have to carry her, Marcus." Marcus knew that carrying Turtle was a lot harder than carrying bread and some tarts, but Turtle had already climbed onto his back by then. "I'll just walk fast," he thought. By the time the Tinklers arrived at the doctor's office, Marcus was very tired. He was also hungry. "Hey, Mila," said Marcus, putting Turtle down. "Can I have one of those jam tarts?" Mila held up an empty paper bag. "I'm sorry," she said, "but all the jam tarts have gone." Marcus looked closely at Mila. She had red spots on her face. The spots looked a lot like bits of raspberry. "Where have they gone?" he asked, a little cross. He was very hungry. Mila shrugged. "I'm not sure. Maybe they evaporated because it's such a warm day." "Evaporated?" repeated Marcus. "You know what evaporated means, don't you, Marcus?" said Mila. "It's when something dries up and disappears." "I know what it means," said Marcus. "I also know that water evaporates, but jam tarts don't." "Really?" said Mila. "How strange. I wonder what's happened to them." "Mila," said Marcus, "did you eat the tarts?" Said Mila thoughtfully. "Maybe I did. But don't forget that it's Tuesday. I always have to eat something red on Tuesdays. It's one of our rules." Marcus had never heard this rule before. He was about to say so, but Mila pushed open the door to the doctor's office and went inside. The waiting room was full of sick people. There were people coughing and people sniffing. There were people with spots and people with bandages. There were people with red faces and people with white faces. There were even people with green faces. "We have definitely come to the right place to catch some germs," Marcus whispered to Mila. Mila sighed. "The problem is, I don't want to catch these people's germs. They all look awful." "I don't want to catch their germs either," said Turtle, sounding worried. "Getting sick is much worse for turtles than for humans. Let's go." But just as they were heading for the door, Mila sneezed. It was a huge, loud sneeze. "Oh no, we're too late," groaned Marcus. "You've already caught something." Mila smiled. "No, I haven't caught anything," she said. "I just had an idea." "What is it?" said Marcus. "I've come up with a way that we can stay inside but not feel sick," said Mila. This idea sounded interesting, but then again, Mila's ideas often sounded that way at first. "How can we do that?" asked Marcus, but Mila wouldn't say. "You'll have to wait and see," she said, "but believe me, it's a great idea. All we need to do now is speak to the doctor." Marcus looked around the waiting room. "That's going to take a long time," he said. "There are lots of people to go in before us." "Don't worry," said Mila. "I'm very good at putting on a sick face. When the lady at the front desk sees it, she'll let us in straight away." "Show us your sick face," said Turtle. Mila pulled a face. Marcus didn't think it really made Mila look sick. It made her look more like a duck that could smell something bad. But Mila had already marched up to the front desk. "Excuse me," said Mila in a very loud voice to the woman sitting there. "It's an emergency. We need to see the doctor right away." When the lady behind the counter looked up, she was frowning. Then Marcus saw her notice the bits of raspberry stuck to Mila's face. Her frown disappeared and now she looked shocked. "You look terrible," she gasped. "Yes, I know," said Mila in a sad voice. "My brother and sister are sick too." "Well then, you'd all better go in to see the doctor right away," said the lady. Mila turned and winked at Marcus. "See, Marcus," she whispered, "I told you I'm very good at pulling sick faces." Marcus wondered whether he should tell Mila about the raspberries stuck to her face. Not just yet, he decided. Dr. Hall smiled when the Tinklers came in. The Tinklers had seen Dr. Hall before. They went to her when Marcus hurt his hand while working on an invention. Dr. Hall had put a bandage on his wrist. They also went to see her when Turtle hurt her shell. Dr. Hall had given her a new cardboard box. And when Mila got a bird's nest tangled in her hair, Dr. Hall untangled it so carefully that it didn't hurt a bit. "What can I do for you three today?" Dr. Hall asked. "Nothing too hard," said Mila, sitting in one of the chairs. "We just want you to put plaster casts on our arms." Dr. Hall looked very surprised. Marcus was surprised too. He would never have guessed this was Mila's big idea. "Not on all of our arms," said Mila quickly. "Just one arm each will do." "But why do you need plaster casts?" said Dr. Hall. "Have you all broken some bones?" Mila shook her head. "Oh no, of course not," she said cheerfully. "We're circus children. Circus children never break bones. We just want casts." "But I can't put casts on for no reason," said Dr. Hall. "Why not?" said Mila. Dr. Hall had to think about this. "Casts are not as much fun as you seem to think," she explained after a moment or two. "It's not like wearing a glove, you know. You can't just take them off whenever you want. Once you have one on, it stays on for weeks. They are itchy, they are hot, and they get very stinky. Most people can't wait to have a cast taken off. You should be glad you don't have to wear one." Marcus decided he didn't want a cast. It didn't sound fun at all. "Come on, Mila," he said, standing up. "Let's go." "I'm sorry I can't help you with the casts," said Dr. Hall, staring at Mila. "But I can help to fix your face." "What's wrong with my face?" said Mila. On Dr. Hall's desk was a mirror. Dr. Hall gave it to Mila. Mila looked at herself and screamed, "Oh no, I've got some horrible disease." Dr. Hall pulled out a tissue and used it to wipe Mila's face. "It looks like raspberries to me. I wish all my patients were so easy to fix." Mila looked crossly at Marcus. "Why didn't you tell me I had raspberries on my face?" she asked. Marcus grinned. "It's Tuesday," he said with a shrug. "I thought you always put raspberries on your face on Tuesdays." The Tinklers said goodbye to Dr. Hall and left. When they got outside, the sun was still shining brightly. "I'm so hungry," grumbled Marcus, leaning against a tree. Suddenly he remembered they still had the huge loaf of white bread the bakers had given them. Plain bread isn't very interesting to eat, but when you're hungry, that doesn't matter. He was about to rip off a bite when Mila suddenly snatched it out of his hands. "Hang on," she cried. "I know what we can do." Mila ripped one end of the loaf off the bread. Then she made a tunnel through the soft dough inside. She made another hole in the other end of the loaf. Finally, she slid her arm through. Her hand stuck out the hole at the end. "See," Mila said to Marcus. She wriggled her fingers. "I've made a cast out of bread." She lifted her arm up and waved it around in the air. "It's perfect. It isn't itchy. It doesn't smell. I can take it off whenever I like." "And can you make a sandwich out of it if you get hungry?" added Marcus. "Marcus," said Mila, "you can't make a sandwich out of my cast." Now sitting up in the tree above the Tinklers were some pigeons. They were the same pigeons who sat outside their window waiting to be fed bits of bread. The Tinklers did this every day, but today they had forgotten to feed the pigeons, so they'd followed them to the doctor's office. When Marcus finally pulled out the huge loaf of bread, the pigeons came very excited. But then when Mila stuck her arm through the loaf of bread, the pigeons were very surprised. "What's she doing to our dinner?" they asked each other. Then one of them said, "I know, she wants us to come and eat the bread off her arm." "Of course," cooed the other pigeons. "Those Tinklers are so kind." In a rush, they all flew down to Mila's arm and began pecking at the bread. "Stop eating my cast," Mila yelled at the pigeons. She waved her arm around, trying to make the pigeons go, but the pigeons didn't understand. The Tinklers were always inventing new ways of doing things. The pigeons thought this was just a new way for the Tinklers to feed them. They kept pecking at the bread until it was all gone. "Goo," they said as they flew away. That meant thanks for the lunch. "Now I don't have a cast anymore," said Mila crossly. "Well, it wouldn't have lasted very long anyway," Marcus pointed out. "The moment it started to rain, it would have turned to mush." "Probably," sighed Mila, "but it was better than nothing." She looked so sad that Marcus wanted to cheer her up. "How about we buy some bandages?" he suggested. "Then we can wrap up our arms ourselves. We could bandage up our legs too if we wanted." Mila cheered up a little bit at that. "Bandages are not as good as plaster casts, but they are okay in an emergency," she said. "And this is definitely an emergency. The weather is getting better and better. If we don't do something quickly, we'll have to stay outside all day." Marcus looked around. "There is a chemist just over there. Let's go and see if they have bandages." The Tinklers walked into the chemist together. Marcus looked around. Against the back wall, he spotted exactly what they were looking for. "Look at all the different sorts of bandages," he said. "There are long ones and short ones and thick ones and thin ones and—" Marcus didn't get to finish his sentence because just then Mila sneezed again, and this time it was even louder than before. What was Mila going to do now? Marcus waited to see. "Let's forget about the bandages for now," Mila said. Her eyes were sparkling. "Let's get some medicine instead. After all, that is what you're supposed to get in a chemist." Mila walked up to the counter. The man standing behind it smiled. "Can I help you?" he asked. "I hope so. We would like some medicine that will make us sing faster and run louder." The chemist laughed. "You mean sing louder and run faster," he said. "I don't mean that at all," said Mila. "We can already do those things. We want to be able to sing very quickly. Then we could sing a lot more songs every day. And we want to run much more loudly because then everyone will turn and look at us as we go by." The chemist shook his head. "I'm sorry, we don't have medicine that does those things." "Really? How disappointing," said Mila. "What sort of medicine do you have?" "Just the normal sort," said the man. "We have something for stomachache and something for headache and something for toothache." Turtle went up to the counter too. "Do you have anything for a shell ache?" she asked. The man gave Turtle a funny look. "There's no such thing as shell ache," he said. "There is for us turtles," said Turtle. "But you're not a turtle," said the man. Turtle bared her teeth and began to growl. "I am so a turtle." "Turtles don't growl," said the chemist. "They do when their shells ache," said Turtle. The man took a step backwards. He looked like he'd had enough of the Tinklers. "I'm sorry, I can't help you," he said. Then he started tidying a shelf. "This man doesn't know much about medicine," Mila muttered to Marcus. "Or turtles," Turtle added. "Well, maybe we can make our own medicine," suggested Marcus. "What a great idea," said Mila. "Let's do it." Marcus had really only said it so he could get his sisters to leave the shop, but the more he thought about it, the more he could see that making a medicine was a pretty good idea. He liked inventing things, and he had never invented a medicine before. But he could see a problem. "What should we use to make the medicine?" Marcus asked. "Let's get some things from here," said Mila. "It is a chemist after all, so everything is medicine." She picked up a packet of jelly beans. "These look like normal jelly beans, don't they?" she said. "That's because they are normal jelly beans," said Marcus. Mila shook her head. "Oh no, Marcus," she said. "These are chemist jelly beans. They will be perfect for our medicine." She put the packet in a shopping basket. Marcus didn't argue. If Mila was wrong, then at least they could eat jelly beans. The Tinklers walked around the shop, looking for things to make medicine with. Turtle picked out 3 tubes of toothpaste. 1 was bubblegum flavour and 2 were mint. Mila grabbed a packet of cough lollies. Marcus chose a blue sports drink. He looked at all the items in the shopping basket. He tried to imagine what would happen when they were mixed together. He was pretty sure they wouldn't make proper medicine. He had a feeling all they would make was a big, goopy mess. But that didn't really matter. Making a big, goopy mess would be almost as good as making medicine. When the Tinklers got home, they went straight to the kitchen. Mila got out their biggest mixing bowl. Marcus poured in the sports drink. Turtle dropped in the cough lollies and the jelly beans. They each squeezed a tube of toothpaste into the mixture. Then Mila got the blender. Now, most children are not allowed to use a blender without adult help, and the ones who can use one probably can't mix up toothpaste and sports drinks and jelly beans and cough lollies. But the Tinklers 3 could mix up whatever they liked. This is why the Tinklers often felt sorry for other children. Marcus turned on the blender. Grrrm! The blender was very loud as it crunched through the cough lollies. Bits of the mixture flew out of the bowl and splattered on the walls. As the mixture got thicker, the blender made a different noise. Gloop, gloop. Mila turned off the blender and the 3 Tinklers looked at the mixture. It was pale blue with colourful bits floating in it. It looks a bit weird, said Marcus slowly. It looks disgusting, said Turtle. I think it looks almost perfect, said Mila. It just needs a few extra touches. Marcus looked around the room. How about some parsley, he said. They had some growing in an old teapot on the windowsill. Yes, said Mila, picking up a handful and throwing it in. What about lettuce, said Turtle. Sure, said Mila, put some in. Marcus opened a cupboard. The Tinklers didn't waste time putting tins and packets in the cupboards. It was much easier just leaving them on the floor. This meant that the cupboards were free for more interesting things like hiding in. But yesterday Marcus had put some things in the cupboard because the floor was full. How about some flour, he suggested, and some fish sauce. Fish sauce! Oh, yes, of course, said Mila. The best medicine always has fish sauce in it. And milk. It must have milk. The Tinklers whizzed the new ingredients into the mixture. Making medicine is fun, said Mila. I don't know why we've never done it before. When the mixture was ready, Mila got a glass. The mixture was very thick. It wasn't light blue anymore. It was dark brown. Mila poured some of it into a glass, and she held the glass out to Marcus. You can try it first, she said. Marcus took a step backwards. No way, he said. Oh, come on, Marcus, said Mila. It's a great honour. Just think, you're the first person to ever try this medicine. You'll be famous. Marcus didn't think that was such a great honour, but he was also a tiny bit curious. Would the medicine work? What would it do exactly? He took the glass and sniffed it. How does it smell, says Mila. Terrible, said Marcus, like old fish. That's good, said Mila, nodding. When medicine smells terrible, it always tastes okay, and when it smells good, that's when you need to be careful. Marcus slowly took a sip of the medicine. He spat it out very quickly. It's horrible, he said. Is it a little bit horrible or a lot horrible? Asked Mila. It's a lot horrible, said Marcus. It's the worst thing I've ever tasted in my whole life. Mila looked pleased. Then it must be very, very good medicine. I don't think so, said Marcus. I felt fine before I tried it. Now I feel sick. Well, of course you do, says Mila. If you take medicine when you're well, it will always make you sick. Turtle looked at the medicine curiously. What does it cure? She asked. That's a good question, said Marcus. We need to invent the illness next. What do you mean? Said Mila. Well, first you invent the medicine, explained Marcus. Then you invent the illness that will fix it. Mila laughed. People don't invent illnesses, she said. Then she stopped. Do they? Don't interrupt me, said Marcus. I'm thinking of an illness. Something really good. I've got it, said Marcus. His cheeks were pink with excitement. I know exactly what illness we need to invent. What? Said Mila and Turtle. Sick wellness, said Marcus. What's that? Asked Turtle. Sick wellness, explained Marcus, is when you're sick of feeling well. It means that you're healthy, but you want to stay inside anyway. Mila thought about this. Then she nodded. That sounds perfect, she said. I think so too, agreed Turtle. But how do we invent it? Marcus smiled. That's the best bit, he said. I think we already have. We don't feel like going outside, even though it is such a nice day. We feel like staying inside and reading and eating soup. That means we're sick well. Turtle looked a bit worried. Will we be sick well forever? Mila shook her head. No, when we take some of the medicine we invented, we'll be well again. But I already drank some of the medicine, Marcus pointed out. Maybe I'm already well again. Mila thought about this. You tried the medicine before we'd worked out what it was for, she said. Do you still feel like staying inside? Yes, said Marcus. Mila smiled. Then you're still SickWell. Being SickWell was a lot of fun. It was actually much, much better than being actually sick. Marcus and Mila took it in turns to lie on the sofa with a blanket tucked up under her chin. Turtle lay in their box. The one who was lying down got to make groaning noises. The other two had to run around and do things for the SickWell one. They had to fluff up pillows and change the TV channel. They had to pat the SickWell one's face with a wet cloth. Then they had to pat it with a dry cloth. They had to bring snacks and things to drink. Each of them had a turn. Then they started again. When it was Mila's second turn, she suddenly sat up. We need soup, she said. But we're not really sick, Marcus pointed out. We're SickWell. We still need soup, insisted Mila. If you stay inside all day, you have to have soup. That's the rule. We just need a different kind. One of us will have to go downstairs and ask grumpy old Mrs. Fitz to make us some SickWell soup. Mrs. Fitz lived in the flat below the Tinklers. She was not really grumpy, but she pretended to be because the Tinklers have asked her. They knew it was important to have a grumpy adult living nearby. Mrs. Fitz always made them soup when they were sick. We don't have to go downstairs, said Marcus. We can use the phone. No, we can't, said Mila. We don't have a phone anymore, remember? Here's what happened to the Tinklers' phone. Turtle had wanted to see if it would work when it was in the fish tank. It didn't. I don't mean the ordinary phone, said Marcus. I mean the Pigeon Phone. Mila looked very interested and a little surprised. You made a phone out of a pigeon, she said. Which bit do you hold to your ear, the tail or the beak? It doesn't work like that, said Marcus. Well, how does it work then, asked Mila. The Pigeon Phone just means that we give a note to one of the pigeons on our windowsill. We tell them to fly through the window below and give the note to Mrs. Fitz. We tell them we'll give them back some bread when they come back. Oh, said Mila, I guess that might work. Marcus wrote a note for Mrs. Fitz. Dear grumpy Mrs. Fitz, could you please come make us soup? We're SickWell, from the Tinklers. He opened the window and spoke to the pigeons sitting there. Will one of you please take this note down to Mrs. Fitz, he said. I'll give you some bread when you come back. Now normally Marcus's plan would have worked perfectly, but not today. The problem was that the pigeons weren't hungry. They'd eaten a whole loaf of bread off Mila's arm. Imagine a loaf of bread that's big enough to cover your arm. That's a lot of bread. The pigeons were all too full to visit Mrs. Fitz. I have an idea, said Mila, getting up off the sofa. She put on some shoes and began to tap dance. Tapani Tap. It was a very loud dance. What are you doing? Said Marcus. I'm doing a Morse code dance, explained Mila. It might sound like clicks and clacks to you, but the taps spell out a message. Mrs. Fitz and I have been practicing. I'm asking her to bring us some SickWell soup. Marcus thought this was a pretty good idea. He just hoped Mrs. Fitz could make out Mila's Morse code taps. When Mila had finished, she sat back on the sofa. I wonder what kind of soup she'll make for us, said Mila. It will have to be the opposite of the sort of soup she usually makes us when we're sick. There was a knock on the door. We're about to find out, said Marcus, as he went over and opened the door. Mrs. Fitz was standing there with a big pot in her arms. She smiled at Marcus and then remembered that she was supposed to be grumpy, so she turned her smile into a frown. She held out the pot. I brought you some Get Even Better soup, she said. Marcus looked into the pot. The soup was cold. It was clear. It had bubbles in it. This soup looks a lot like lemonade, said Marcus. Mrs. Fitz nodded. That's because lemonade is the main ingredient in this soup. In fact, it's the only ingredient. Mila took the pot. Thank you, Mrs. Fitz. I'll serve it up. Everyone followed Mila into the kitchen. Mila got some cups and started to fill them. Stop, said Mrs. Fitz. Everyone stared at her. This is not a Get Even Better drink, said Miss Fitz sternly. It's a Get Even Better soup. You have to eat it out of a bowl, with a spoon. Of course, said the three Tinklers together. Are you sure you didn't grow up in a circus, Mrs. Fitz? Mila asked. No, said Mrs. Fitz, but I always wanted to run away and join one. Marcus thought Mrs. Fitz would have been very good in the circus. Mila got some bowls and Marcus found some spoons. Mila gave some soup to Marcus and some to Turtle. Turtle would only eat hers after Mila put some bits of lettuce in it. Mrs. Fitz had some too. Eating lemonade out of a bowl didn't feel at all strange to the Tinklers. It felt just right, and the lemonade tasted even better than it usually did. "I'm always going to have lemonade this way," said Mila. Mrs. Fitz looked shocked. "You can't do that," she said sternly. "You can only have this soup when you're SickWell." "Well, that's okay," said Mila. "We'll probably be SickWell for a few days at least, don't you think, Marcus?" "Unfortunately," Marcus said with a grin, "I think you're right."